Hey guys, tonight we slip back through time, way back, to a city where the cobblestones shine slick beneath gaslight, and the air smells of coal smoke, cheap gin, and something sweetly rotten you can't quite name. It's the 1880s in London, or maybe Manchester, or even Edinburgh. The setting doesn't matter much, because the rhythm is the same in every Victorian town after dark. You're not a noble or a scholar or a factory hand tonight. You're something else entirely. A working woman in one of the oldest professions there is. You probably won't survive this century, but for the next half hour, you'll see it from the inside. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, drop your location and local time down below. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start the night on a narrow street where the fog doesn't drift. It clings. It gathers in curls around your ankles, as though testing you, asking whether you really mean to step forward. The sound of carriage wheels echoes off brick walls. Somewhere a piano plinks a tune that's trying too hard to be cheerful. You've already powdered your face in the mirror of your shared upstairs room. A mirror with a crack that slices your reflection into two women, one confident, one frightened. You tug at your bodice, smoothing the cheap satin that's meant to look more expensive in dim light. You're 20, maybe 23. It's hard to be exact because years blur together when every night feels the same length. A single candle flickers in the window as a sign we're open. The house itself is respectable, looking from the outside. That's part of the trick. Behind lace curtains and polite architecture, a madam keeps her little empire humming. Her name might be Mrs. Blackwell or Mrs. Price. Every district has its own, and she runs the place with a discipline that could rival a boarding school. Inside, the air is thick with perfume, pipe smoke, and something else. A hint of lavender trying to smother the smell of bodies. A girl you share a room with, Annie, laughs too loudly from the stairwell, holding a tray of gin glasses. She has a chipped tooth and a laugh that makes even the sullen types soften for a moment. You trudge toward the parlor, the boards creaking under your heels. The wallpaper once was burgundy, now it's an uneven mix of faded crimson and tea stains. The lamps glow low to flatter the guests, smoothing out both faces and morals. The first men of the night always arrive a little shyly. Clerks, sailors, coachmen. They linger in doorways, pretending they're just looking for a drink. You've learned not to meet their eyes too quickly. A quick look says business. A slower one says safety. In this trade, reading faces is survival. You make your living in glances, half smiles, the practiced flick of your wrist when you pour gin into a glass. The madam says never to drink too much. Men pay for your sparkle, not your stupor. You sip water when they aren't watching, and let the illusion of intoxication do the rest. Historians still argue whether most women here chose this life freely or were cornered by hunger. Truth is, both can be true at once. You came because factory work didn't pay enough, because your landlord didn't care about tears, and because sometimes survival looks like sin from the outside. You can hear the world outside still ticking. The lamplighter's pole scraping glass, a constable's boots on stone. But inside, time folds in on itself. Each night becomes a loop of laughter and negotiation. The hours stretch, then vanish. There's a rule here, unspoken but ironclad. Never fall asleep before the madam does. She walks the halls late, her skirts brushing like a metronome, checking that every lamp is low, every coin counted, every girl still breathing. The pay isn't consistent. Some nights you might earn enough to buy a ribbon or a warm shawl. Others, you'll owe the house money for gin or laundry. It's a quiet kind of debt, that never quite disappears, like a thread tied around your wrist. A mainstream historical fact: in the late 19th century, London alone had over 5,000 registered brothels, though official numbers were always guesses. Police reports focused more on appearances than accuracy, and many of these houses doubled as lodging, offering beds to let by the hour. The Madam's ledger was both a business record and a survival map. You stand near the piano now, pretending to listen to the off-key tune. Your feet ache, and the corset ribs bite into your sides. But you've learned to hide discomfort like a stage actor. A fringe tidbit whispers through the room. Someone says that Queen Victoria herself had ordered police to ignore the houses, for the gentleman needs somewhere to go. Historians would later point out there's no evidence of that royal command, but it circulates anyway, a folk rumor that makes you laugh into your glass. An older client approaches, a watchmaker with trembling hands. He tips his hat as if this is church. You guide him toward the back room, and the sound of the city fades behind the thick curtains. What you sell isn't always what people think. Sometimes it's silence, sometimes a listening ear. He talks more than he touches. His words spill out like gears clicking in a clock. About a son who won't speak to him, about the coldness of his shop. You nod, you murmur. You know the script, the performance of intimacy, the illusion of care. In another century, someone will call this emotional labor. You just call it staying alive. When he leaves, you count the coins carefully. You hide one under your mattress. It's copper, but it feels like gold. The other girls drift back into the parlor, wiping their mouths, adjusting their skirts. There's laughter, real and forced, because if you stop laughing too long, the quiet feels like drowning. Outside, the fog thickens. Somewhere, a cat yowls, and the gaslight wavers. You slip into the back hall to breathe. The wallpaper smells of damp. There's a cracked window where you sometimes peek at the sky. What little of it you can see. London stars aren't bright. They shimmer through soot like reluctant ghosts. A small superstition has taken root among the women's. If you make a wish when the last gas lamp on the corner goes out, it might come true. No one admits believing it, but every night, someone's eyes flick toward the glass at just that moment. Tonight, your wish is simple. That no one causes trouble, that you make enough to eat in the morning, and that your shoes hold out another week. A carriage clatters past. You catch your reflection again in the darkened window. You almost don't recognize her. The rouge, the smirk, the eyes that look older than they should. But you straighten up. There's still another hour to go before closing, and in this life, you measure strength by how well you fake serenity. You head back toward the light, adjusting your hair as the madam watches from her chair. Her smile is thin, like the edge of a coin. Time moves strangely here. Some nights, it drags, each minute heavy as wet wool. Other nights vanish in a blink. The world outside forgets you exist, but inside, you learn every rhythm. The tap of boots on the stair, the sound of coins clinking, the way laughter can turn sharp if someone spills a secret. A scholarly debate lingers even now. Were these houses places of female agency? Tiny islands of control in a patriarchal sea? Or just another kind of prison gilded by candlelight? Historians still argue, you just live it. You climb the stairs toward your small room when the night winds down. Annie's already asleep, her hair undone, her hand still clutching a ribbon someone gave her. You move quietly, washing your face in the chipped basin. The water cold enough to sting. The rouge runs down the drain like blood from a cut fruit. You lie down, corset loosened but not off. You never risk being found unready. The boards creak when the madam makes her final round. A faint piano note lingers in the air. Maybe a memory, maybe real. Outside, dawn begins to smudge the sky a weak grey. You let your eyes close. The city hums beneath you, relentless and alive. Somewhere a milk cart rattles. And you almost laugh, because the day always comes too soon, dragging you forward, whether you're ready or not. You tell yourself you'll leave someday, move to a quieter town, maybe keep a boarding house. You even believe it for a moment. But for now, the candle guttering on your nightstand is enough light to hold on to. Morning in the house doesn't really begin, it just shifts. The same air, the same smells, but softer light creeping through lace curtains. You wake up not from rest, but from noise, the rattle of a chamber pot, the soft cough of another girl whose lungs are starting to give out, the squeak of the madam's shoes on the landing. You stretch, sore from a night's work, and for a second you forget where you are. Then the corset cord bites your ribs again, and you remember perfectly. Annie's already up, brushing her hair in front of the mirror with the cracked edge. She hums tunelessly, her voice raw from smoke and laughter. "You coming down?" she asks, though she doesn't look at you. No one meets eyes too early. It's bad luck, or maybe just too intimate before coffee. Downstairs, the parlor looks almost innocent in daylight. Lace doilies, half-wilted flowers in a vase, the piano lid shut tight. You could almost pretend it's a boarding house for traveling seamstresses. Almost. The smell of gin never really leaves the wood. Mrs. Blackwell, the madam, stands near the door counting coins into neat stacks. Her rings click against the table like tiny hammers. She's not cruel, exactly, but she keeps her face carved in calm authority, like a portrait that never changes expression. "Breakfast," she says, without looking up, and then room's tidy. "I'll not have the constable sniffing dirt if he ever knocks again." You nod, because nodding costs nothing. The house rules are simple, though they might as well be commandments. Never argue in front of clients. Never short the madam her cut. Never get too drunk to stand. And the golden rule: never, ever bring trouble to the door. Trouble can wear many faces: a jealous lover, an unpaid creditor, a police officer who thinks a bribe is his due. You shuffle into the kitchen, where the cook, technically a maid, but she's been here longer than anyone, hands you a crust of bread and something pretending to be coffee. It's chicory, bitter and earthy. The warmth helps, though, settling in your stomach like a promise of endurance. On the wall above the stove hangs a small wooden plaque, painted with a motto: "Cleanliness is next to godliness." Everyone laughs at it, but Mrs. Blackwell insists it stays. She says the house must look respectable to the street, or will be treated worse than rats. You take your bread to the back stairs and sit. It's the only spot with a draft of cool air. You can hear the muffled voices from upstairs. Girls washing, laughing, complaining. Someone's singing a snatch of a popular music hall tune. She was poor, but she was honest. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The hierarchy in the house is invisible but strict. At the top, the madam. Beneath her, the senior girls, parlor ladies, who get first pick of clients and sometimes act as assistants or spies. Below them are the juniors, like you and Annie, who work longer hours for smaller shares. And at the bottom, the drudges, girls who clean, fetch, or do kitchen work until they're ready. The madam manages it all like a small business. Ledger books, credit lines with the local gin supplier, arrangements with the constable. You've learned that she slips him a little pouch every Friday. Insurance, she calls it. Historians still argue whether those so-called protections counted as corruption, or simply the cost of doing business in Victorian vice. Mid-morning, Blackwell gathers everyone in the parlor. She carries her notebook, a small black ledger with names, amounts, and notes written in fine cursive. "All right, my doves," she begins, voice syrupy but firm. "You did well last night. No drunks, no fights. Annie, that gentleman from the docks asked for you again. And you," she glances at you, "made 3 shillings and 6. Don't lose the habit of saving. You murmur thanks. Saving is easier said than done. Every penny seems to slip away for washing, for ribbons, for the endless bottles of perfume that hide the truth of the job. The madam assigns cleaning tasks next. She calls it keeping house respectably. You take the front parlor, dusting the mantelpiece where an old clock ticks stubbornly. Its brass face gleams, even though it's been broken for years. No one dares throw it out. It's part of the illusion that time behaves normally here. A mainstream historical fact by the 1870s. Many brothels styled themselves as houses of accommodation, with printed house rules and even inspection days. Reformers believed order could civilize vice. Some houses enforced curfews, dress codes, and bookkeeping so precise it rivaled hotels. Respectability, even in sin, sold better. By midday, a few of the men who stayed the night shuffle out, hats pulled low, faces red. The madam greets each with the same polite farewell. So lovely to see you, sir. She could run a duchess's drawing room with that voice. You and the others change linens, sweep ash, polish glasses. The work is endless but grounding. Annie mutters about a new law she overheard at the gin shop. Something about contagious diseases acts. She says women are being inspected by doctors without consent. Like animals, she says. They don't even look at the men. You've heard the same rumors. Some say it's for public health. Others call it tyranny. Historians still argue whether those laws were more about protecting soldiers than protecting women. You wipe the last table and glance toward the window. Outside, the city bustles on as if unaware of this house's hidden life. Delivery boys, clerks, a woman with a basket of flowers. For a fleeting second, you envy her. The simple motion of walking in daylight without pretense. Annie nudges you. Stop staring. You'll wear a hole in the glass. You grin weakly. By afternoon, you're allowed an hour of rest. The girls sprawl across beds, curl up on benches, or sew ribbons into hairpieces. Someone tells a joke about a priest and a pickle jar, and laughter fills the room, light and silly. The kind of laughter that makes you forget for a moment. Then Mrs. Blackwell's bell rings from below, and the mood changes instantly. It's almost time to open again. You wash your face in cool water, reapply powder, rouge your lips. The same motions every day, so practiced they feel like prayer. You wonder if you'll keep doing them when you're old, out of habit. A quirky historical tidbit drifts through conversation. Someone claims the Queen's surgeon once recommended mutton fat and rose oil as the perfect skin softener for ladies of the night. Annie snorts. Smells like supper, not seduction. You both laugh, quiet but real. Downstairs, the lamps are being lit again, their yellow glow cutting through the gathering dusk. The madam surveys each of you like a general before battle. No gin stains, no back talk, and smiles. Girls, smiles make the rent. You take your position near the piano again, where men will soon hover like moths. The day has dissolved back into night without ceremony. One of the senior girls leans close. Heard there's a new inspector in the district, she whispers. Likes to count girls like sheep, make sure the books are proper. You shrug. As long as he pays for his time counting. She grins, approving. Humor is currency here, worth more than gold. When the doorbell rings, you straighten, feeling the faint pull of your corset, the powder dry on your cheeks. The madam glides forward, her face soft as butter in lamplight. The guests come in, coats damp from rain. And just like that, the hierarchy snaps back into motion, the madam the queen. The senior girls her ladies, you and Annie her soldiers. The system hums. Clean, cruel, efficient. Historians like to describe Victorian brothels as microcosms of society, little replicas of class order inside four smoky walls. Looking around, you believe it. The madam is the monarch, the girls, the subjects, the men, temporary invaders with coins instead of crowns. but within the cracks, tiny freedoms live. The way you wink at Annie. The way you stash coins under a loose floorboard. The way you hum to yourself when no one's listening. Those are your rebellions. Small, invisible, but yours. Later that night, when the last customer stumbles out and the lamps burn low, the madam locks the door with a sigh. She counts again, always counts. You slip upstairs quietly, your head throbbing, your feet swollen. Annie mutters in her sleep, dreaming of something sweet, maybe a seaside she's never seen. You sit at the window for a moment before lying down. The fog has lifted, and the stars are faint but there. You wonder if they ever look back, watching the same pattern night after night, whispering, "Still here, still surviving." Morning fades without glory again, and by mid-afternoon the house hums with the peculiar calm that comes before the nightly storm. You're seated before the mirror, the one with its spiderweb crack, surrounded by an organized chaos of ribbons, rouge pots, hairpins, and faintly sticky perfume bottles. Every evening begins this way, a transformation that feels part ritual, part armor. Annie perches beside you, carefully trimming her lashes with tiny scissors. They say real ladies use goose fat to make them shine, she says, squinting at her reflection. You laugh softly. If goose fat made anyone respectable, we'd all be duchesses by now. The two of you share a grin, the kind that flashes like a secret. Outside, a coal cart rattles down the street, leaving soot drifting through the open window. It lands on your powder box, a fine grey dust over white. You brush it away gently. It's a losing battle, but the gesture counts. Your reflection is patient as you work, rouge to wake up pale cheeks, coal smudged carefully along the eyes. In this mirror world, you sculpt the woman men pay to meet. She's brighter, smoother, endlessly confident. Beneath her, your real face watches quietly. The transformation isn't only for them, it's also for you. It builds a kind of shield, separating the soft, frightened parts of you from what the night demands. The scent of rosewater and stale gin mingle in the air, oddly comforting. The madam passes behind you, inspecting like a general at parade. Hair up for the evening, dear. A neat neck sells better than a clever tongue. Her tone is casual, but you catch the lesson inside it. Appearances aren't decoration. They're strategy. She's right, of course. The house lives or dies by illusion. Every dress, every flicker of candlelight, every practiced giggle is part of the theatre. Victorian society thrives on pretending that vice, dressed prettily enough, becomes something else entirely. A mainstream historical fact by the 1880s. Fashion and prostitution were more intertwined than most polite citizens dared admit. Brothel workers were often the first to adopt new trends. Corset shapes, hairstyles, even slang, which later filtered upward into middle-class wardrobes. Some historians argue that what women wore in the drawing rooms of London had already debuted in the parlours of its darker streets. Your own dress tonight is pale blue satin, borrowed from the house stock, paid off in weekly deductions. The neckline dips lower than decency allows, but that's the point. You fasten the cameo brooch Mrs. Blackwell insists each girl wear. It's her signature, her brand. Clients might forget faces, but they remember that little ivory oval gleaming at a throat. Annie steps back to admire you. You look like someone who could ruin a man's fortune. You smirk. Just trying to pay the rent. Behind the humor lies the truth. Every ruffle and ribbon has a price. The madam buys cosmetics in bulk, cheap mixtures of lead and vinegar that burn the skin if you're not careful. You dab carefully, knowing the cost of mistakes. A fringe tidbit some women swear by crushed strawberries for lip tint. Others use cochineal beetles for that rich carmine red. It sounds romantic until you remember how many bugs it takes for a single jar. As the lamps are lit downstairs, you hear the familiar click of glass against wood, the shuffle of chairs, the piano's hesitant opening notes. The house is waking again. You take one last look at yourself. Beneath the powder and curls, a strange calm settles in. You've learned that beauty isn't vanity. It's camouflage. Descending the stairs, you feel the brush of silk against your legs. The faint creak of the corset's whalebone. The fabric swishes in rhythm with your heartbeat. For a moment, you imagine you could be anyone. A duchess at a ball, a stage actress, a ghost haunting her own reflection. The parlor glows golden from the gaslight. The madam has placed bowls of violets on every table to disguise the scent of smoke. Atmosphere, she calls it. Annie rolls her eyes but says nothing. Clients begin trickling in. 1, 2, then half a dozen. The piano gains confidence, stumbling into a recognizable waltz. You find your corner near the velvet sofa, practicing the soft, detached smile that suggests mystery without menace. The room is a marketplace of gestures. Men compare watches and words, women reply in glances and laughter. You pour gin, but only half fills. It's better for the profits and the sobriety. The madam nods approvingly. A gentleman approaches, younger than most, his suit too fine for this district. He introduces himself as Stephen Ellery, a name that sounds borrowed. You don't question it, names are costumes too. He comments on your dress, your earrings, the faint scent of lavender on your wrist. You tell him, half truthfully, that you import it from Paris. He believes you. Or he wants to. You've learned that conversation is its own kind of performance. Ask about their wives, and they freeze. Ask about their work, and they boast. Offer neither judgment nor pity, just interest, soft and convincing. Historians still argue whether this ability to navigate the emotional weather of men counted as skill, survival, or exploitation. You don't bother labeling it. You just practice until it works. Later, in the dressing room, Annie fixes a loose curl in your hair. You know, she says, we ought to open a theatre someday. We're already actors. Actors don't have to wash gin off their sleeves. You reply. She grins. Only because they have better gin. The laughter lingers as you return to the parlor. It's nearly midnight now, the air thick with perfume and tobacco. You move through it like a dancer, smiling, listening, always careful not to drink too deeply or stand too still. Stillness invites thought, and thought invites despair. A clock chimes too. Somewhere upstairs, a door slams. The madam frowns but doesn't rise. She trusts her senior girls to manage the drama. You take another man's arm, lead him toward a quieter room, your steps measured, practiced. He tells you about his wife's pearls, his horse, his investments in steam engines. You nod at the right moments, interject small noises of admiration. You've learned that men prefer their own echoes. When he leaves, you study your reflection again in the parlor mirror. The powder's fading, the lipstick smudged, but the illusion still holds. Barely. You catch Annie's eye across the room. She's pretending to listen to a sailor's tale about tropical storms. You both suppress a laugh when the man gestures dramatically and nearly spills his drink. The smallest joke can feel like rebellion. Back in your room, you unpin your hair, shaking out the curls. The pins clatter on the table like rain. You wipe away your makeup with a damp cloth. The rouge streaks pink. The powder turns grey. Beneath it, your face feels naked, strange. You stare for a while. The woman who looks back is tired, yes, but she's also resilient. You've built her from scratch, piece by piece. A scholarly debate still circles the subject of beauty in the trade. Was it empowerment or entrapment? Did the act of self-adornment give women control over their image? Or did it deepen dependence on the male gaze? You think maybe it's both. A costume can imprison you, but it can also protect you. Before sleep, you check the small tin under the bed where your savings live. A few coins, a button, a folded note with no name. You touch them lightly, as if they might multiply by sympathy. The last lamp flickers out. In the quiet, You still smell rose oil and powder, ghosts of the evening's performance. You close your eyes and drift, half dreaming of a world where you could walk the streets in your own skin and still be seen as enough. You wake, with the pale grey of morning filtering through curtains, heavy with dust and secrets. The city hums faintly beyond the glass. A wagon rolling, a hawker's call, the clipped footsteps of early clerks. For a few moments, you let yourself lie still, listening to it all like it's another world. Then the madam's voice echoes up the stairs. "Up, girls. You can rest when you're respectable." And the spell breaks. You dress quickly, pulling on your shift and corset, lacing it until your breath shortens, but your posture improves. The day's slow rhythm begins cleaning, eating, pretending to rest, and then dressing again for the night. Always the night. By evening, the lamps are lit, and the parlor fills with low conversation. The scent of brandy and cheap cologne mixes with that of candle wax melting onto brass holders. You're ready again, painted, powdered, smiling. You've done this so many times that even your heartbeat seems to follow the rhythm of the room. The first clients arrive early tonight, which means they're nervous. The timid ones always are. A clerk with round spectacles and ink stains on his fingers stands near the piano, pretending to read the wallpaper. You glide toward him, smooth as habit. "Long day?" you ask softly. He startles, then smiles awkwardly. Yes. Ledgers never end. You nod sympathetically, though you've no idea what ledgers truly entail. He seems grateful just to be spoken to kindly. Sometimes kindness is the first service sold here. You pour him gin. Half measure, half water. The madam taught you that trick. Clients stay generous longer when they think they're drinking heavily. He talks, and you listen. About his employer, his dreams of owning a small shop, his mother's bad health. You let the conversation meander like a lazy river, tossing in the occasional, "Oh," or "How dreadful." He relaxes by degrees until he looks almost human again. A mainstream historical fact. Victorian brothels were not always dens of frenzy and vice as moralists claimed. In many cases, conversation, long, wary, or sentimental, made up most of the night's trade. Many men came seeking talk more than touch, looking for a place where they could confess without consequence. Some paid extra just to be listened to. The clerk eventually leaves, lighter in coin and perhaps in spirit. You don't feel sorry for him. Pity is expensive, you can't afford it. Next, a pair of sailors tumble in, loud and smelling of salt and smoke. They've just been paid. Annie intercepts them with her best grin, steering them toward the back room before they knock over the furniture. You give her a wink. She'll handle them fine. You stay in the parlor where another man has appeared. He's older, polished, the kind who hides his accent behind careful diction. You've seen him before. A barrister, you think. He always asks for you. "Good evening, miss," he says with that polite, tired voice of someone who spends his days talking too much. "Evening," you reply, offering a seat. "Same drink as usual. Please." You pour brandy this time. He pays double to drink the real thing. For a while you sit in companionable silence. The gaslight hums, the piano stumbles through a sentimental tune upstairs. He glances at you, then at the fire. "I had to argue a case today," he says suddenly, "about a boy accused of theft. 12 years old." You tilt your head. "Was he guilty?" He sighs. "He was hungry." You both sit quietly after that. There's nothing to say. Historians still argue whether men who frequented these houses were purely exploiters or sometimes, however faintly, also the exploited. The truth, as usual, is blurred. Everyone here buys and sells something, even if it's only relief. When he leaves, he presses a coin into your hand, more than usual. You tuck it away before the madam sees. Small victories matter. Later, in the lull between guests, the girls gather in the kitchen. Someone's stolen a piece of bread from the pantry, and it's passed around like treasure. Annie tells a story about a man who claimed he'd invented a machine to read dreams. Said he could print them on paper. She giggles. Imagine what he'd find in ours. You nearly choke on your crust laughing. He'd burn the paper before it cooled. The laughter is easy tonight. Maybe because no one's been hit, no one's cried, and the constable hasn't come sniffing. You take joy where it hides. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind as you brush crumbs from your lap. Some Victorian gentlemen believed that women's laughter could unsettle the humours, making them dangerously seductive. Doctors even wrote papers about it. You decide that's the best reason to laugh louder. When midnight strikes, the tone of the night shifts. The early timid men have gone. What's left are the confident, the careless, and the drunk. You know how to handle them. A man in a tweed coat leans too close, breath thick with whiskey. What's your name? He slurs. You smile. Whichever one you like. He grins, satisfied with the illusion of power. You guide him to a chair, light his pipe, and let him talk about hunting, politics, and the absurd price of cigars. In your head, you count seconds between his sentences. Like a sailor marking tides, you've learned that patience can outlast any boast. The madam moves through the room like a shadow, watching everything. She knows who's earning, who's slipping. Occasionally she whispers in your ear, "That one's spent enough." Or, "Let him think he's charming." Her control is subtle, constant. As dawn creeps close, the men thin out. The sailors have fallen asleep. The clerk has returned to his wife's breakfast table. The barrister is likely already regretting his generosity. You and Annie mop the floor, clear the glasses, and light one last candle against the chill. You lean on the broom, exhausted. Annie hums the same tune as always. For a moment, you imagine her somewhere else, maybe in a seaside inn, apron clean, hair loose. Maybe you're there too. Maybe no one asks your names at all. Then the madam calls from upstairs. "Ladies, ledger in the morning. Don't forget your share." You groan quietly. The ledger is fairness and bondage in equal measure. It tracks every shilling, every expense, every bottle of gin that mysteriously appears on your bill. You go to bed before sunrise. The air smells of smoke and violets gone stale. You lie down in your shift, body sore but mind alert, replaying fragments of conversation, half confessions, jokes, little kindnesses that somehow keep you human. And as your eyes close, you think of the night's irony, that in a world ruled by men, you've learned more about them than most wives ever will. Their fears, their boredom, their strange tenderness, all traded for coins and secrets. You drift to sleep wondering whether, someday, someone will write down what it felt like. Not just the scandal, but the small, steady heartbeat of survival behind every practiced smile. Money, in this house, is the language everyone speaks but no one trusts. It clinks, it whispers, it vanishes. You wake to the sound of Mrs. Blackwell counting in the parlor again, her coins tapping out a rhythm that could almost be music if it weren't so sharp. Each sound is a reminder's every smile, every drop of gin, every flicker of gaslight costs something. You stretch beneath your thin blanket, bones aching from too many nights in corset stays. Annie's still asleep beside you, hair tangled across her face. Her hand curls around a coin as if it were a keepsake. You envy her the peace that lets her sleep through the sound of debt being tallied. By mid-morning, the madam summons you all downstairs for what she calls accounts. It happens once a week, part sermon, part mathematics. She sits behind her small desk with her ledger open, the quill poised like a weapon. "All right, my lovelies," she begins. "Let's see who's in credit, and who's been careless." You stand in line, half listening as she reads out names. The older girls know how to nod and smile, no matter what the figures say. The newer ones, like Elsie, barely 16, try to argue. "I only had 2 guineas," she protests. "You marked 4. And Mrs. Blackwell's eyes stay kind, her voice not. "2 I saw, 2 you forgot. Learn to remember, or you'll remember debt instead." When your turn comes, she glances up. 3 nights, steady work. That's 6 shillings earned. 4 deducted. Powder, board, laundry, gin. She looks at you over her spectacles. "Leaving 2. You may take 1. Or keep both in the book toward new shoes." You hesitate. The soles of your boots are thin enough to taste the cobblestone through them. But the thought of having nothing in the ledger, no safety at all, makes your stomach twist. "Keep them in the book," you say quietly. The madam smiles as though you've passed a test. Good girl. Sensible. Historians still argue whether such ledgers were acts of fairness or cages made of arithmetic. Some madams swore their girls benefited from managed savings. Others used the system to ensure no one could afford to leave. For you, it feels like both. A trick that keeps you slightly afloat while anchoring you forever to this house. After accounts, you slip out to the pawn shop 2 streets over. The owner, Mr. Hill, is a plump man who smells of iron and dust. He greets you with practiced politeness. "Back again, miss." You nod, setting a small brook on the counter. Not the cameo, Mrs. Blackwell's brand, but a ribbon trinket you once won from a generous client. He weighs it in his hand, squints. 3 pence. "It's worth more," you protest gently. He shrugs. "Everything's worth more until it's sold." You take the coin. It will buy bread, maybe soap, not both. Outside, the fog presses close, smelling faintly of ash. The city is waking properly now, cart wheels rattling. Costermongers shouting, the clatter of horseshoes like applause. You walk with your shawl pulled tight, careful to keep your face neutral. There's a bakery at the corner that sometimes sells yesterday's loaves for half price. You manage one, still soft in the middle, and carry it home wrapped in paper. Annie greets you at the door with a grin. You're a saint. You break the bread together in the kitchen. It's hard, chewy, perfect. "Do you ever think we'll have enough to leave?" Annie asks between bites. You chew slowly, thinking. Enough isn't the problem. It's knowing where to go once you've got it. She nods, as if that settles it. A mainstream historical fact, by the late Victorian era, prostitution had become deeply entangled with London's informal economy. Pawnbrokers, landlords, laundresses, and gin merchants all relied on the steady drip of brothel earnings. Economists rarely mention it, but vice money helped keep entire neighborhoods solvent. The madam knows this, of course. Her small empire runs on trade as much as sin. She buys gin cheap from a friendly publican, cloth from a tailor who turns a blind eye, candles from a widow with a secret discount. Every transaction leaves another thread in the web. And then there's the question of credit. Some clients pay in coin, others in promises. "Next week, darling," they say, and sometimes they even mean it. Mrs. Blackwell keeps a separate notebook for those men, a quiet little record of who owes what. One day, she jokes, that book will be worth more than the Bank of England. You doubt it. Men like that rarely pay debts that don't shout. A quirky tidbit makes the rounds tonight as you and the girls get ready for evening. Someone claims a gentleman once tried to pay a debt with a ticket to the Crystal Palace exhibition, saying it was as good as gold. The madam allegedly tore it in half and used it to light her pipe. The laughter it sparks is worth more than the truth of the story. Later, as twilight settles, you sit by the window mending a small tear in your sleeve. Outside, the lamplighter moves from post to post, his pole tipped with flame. You imagine his life steady, predictable, paid weekly. There's envy in that thought, though you'd never admit it aloud. Annie leans against the wall, watching you work. You sew like you were born to it, she says. My mother taught me, you reply. Said it's the one skill a woman will always need. She wasn't wrong. Historians still debate whether most women in the trade managed to save anything at all. Some did. Enough to open small tea shops or boarding houses later. But many more saw their savings vanish in illness, theft, or the sudden disappearance of a trusted madam. You keep your coins in a small tin under a loose floorboard. Not much yet, but it's proof of intention. When night falls, the house fills again. The madam has new guests. 2 wealthy men, one already drunk, one pretending not to be. You pour drinks, play the charming hostess. They toss coins onto the table like children scattering pebbles. For a moment, it feels easy, almost normal, to laugh, to play along. Then the drunk one grabs your wrist too tightly. Smile more, sweetheart, he says, voice rough. You keep your face pleasant, your voice steady. Let go, sir. He blinks, startled by the calm. The madam's eyes flash from across the room. She's on her feet before the man can say another word. Gentlemen, she purrs. We appreciate generous company, but not clumsy hands. You'll find plenty of other doors open in this city. Her tone is sweet, her meaning clear. The men leave after a few muttered curses. You breathe again. Mrs. Blackwell turns to you. You did right. Always keep your temper. I'll handle the rest. You nod. Gratitude is dangerous here. It can start to feel like love. But for one moment, you allow yourself a sliver of it. As the last of the guests depart, you count your earnings. 5 shillings tonight, more than usual. Enough to keep one, hide one, and owe the rest. You split the coins quietly. 1 into your pocket, 1 beneath the floorboard. It's a private ritual, a small declaration that someday, somehow, you'll be free of the book. When you finally lie down, Annie's already asleep. Her breathing is soft, even. You stare at the ceiling where the plaster cracks like a map. Maybe, you think, that's what debt really is. A geography of promises, drawn across your life, until you learn the exits by heart. You close your eyes, imagining a future where the sound of coins means comfort instead of control. Morning creeps in through the cracks of the shutters again, soft and grey. Like the world is still deciding whether it's worth starting another day. You stretch, sore but not surprised by it. The rhythm of your body has become the rhythm of this place. Slow in daylight, sharp at night, and always just tired enough to forget to dream. Downstairs, someone's already boiling water. The smell of weak tea drifts up the stairwell, followed by the creak of floorboards as Mrs. Blackwell moves about. You rise, pulling on a shawl. Your reflection in the cloudy mirror greets you like a ghost you half remember. You've started to notice small changes. The faint circles under your eyes, the steadying calm in your face when you smile. You've become good at not looking startled by yourself anymore. The day feels quiet, which is both a relief and a worry. A brothel without noise is either blessed or cursed. You descend the stairs cautiously, bare feet whispering against the wood. Annie sits at the kitchen table, her hair pinned up loosely, a cup between her palms. Madam's gone out, she says, yawning. To see some inspector about licenses again. You nod. Licenses. The city's way of pretending respectability could be counted and stamped like meat at market. A mainstream historical fact. By the 1860s, London authorities were experimenting with what they called Contagious Diseases Acts, requiring prostitutes in certain districts to undergo medical examinations and register with the police. It was supposed to protect men from infection, though no one cared much about protecting the women. Some madams welcomed the oversight. It kept the constables predictable. Others, like Mrs. Blackwell, saw it as yet another leash. Do you think she'll actually do it? Annie asks. Register the house. I mean, only if she must. You reply. Paperwork means attention. She likes her shadows. You both sip tea in silence for a while. Then, From upstairs a groan. Elsie again, coughing through another cold. You bring her a damp cloth, and some of the bread you saved from yesterday. She looks small beneath the blanket, cheeks pale. Can't seem to shake it, she says weakly. You need proper food, not gin and crumbs. She laughs faintly. Proper food costs proper money. I'll be better soon. You don't argue. No one here likes to count what sickness costs. Later, you venture out for errands. Soap, a spool of thread, and maybe some news. The streets are alive with the ordinary chaos of London's. Carts piled high with fish, beggars at corners, flower girls calling their wares, fog curls between the buildings, hiding and revealing faces in turns. You pass a group of boys throwing stones at a rat and a preacher bellowing about fallen women. You keep walking. A quirky tidbit floats through your thoughts. One pamphlet claimed that moral decline could be reversed through the use of lavender water and honest labor. You almost laugh aloud. Lavender might hide the smell of gin, but it won't hide poverty. You stop near a bookseller's stand, eyeing the cheap prints. Illustrations of respectable ladies in hats so large they could host tea on them. The irony stings. But there's beauty in the ink lines too. The bookseller looks up. Looking for something, miss? You shake your head. Just passing by. He smiles kindly. Everyone's passing by. That's London for you. You move on. By afternoon, the madam returns, face flushed from the cold and from dealing with officials. She sets down her gloves with a snap. Fools, the lot of them. They say the acts will make us cleaner. Cleaner! As if dirt lives only on women. Her fury is almost comforting. When Mrs. Blackwell is angry, it means she still believes in control. She gathers you and the other girls in the parlor, voice steady again. We'll stay as we are. If anyone asks, this is a private boarding house. You're all companions, not courtesans. Understood? A murmur of agreement fills the room. You nod, though the lie feels fragile. One nosy constable, one jealous rival, and the illusion could crack. Good, she says. Now, get ready for evening. A gentleman from the docks has sent word he'll bring friends. As you prepare, Annie hums softly, curling her hair. Imagine, she says, if one of those officials ever had to spend a night like ours. Wouldn't last an hour. You smile. They'd write a report about it. When night arrives, the parlor glows golden again, full of voices and laughter that feels slightly too loud. Like everyone's trying to forget they have thoughts. You keep your smile practiced, your tone gentle. The men tonight are dock workers. Loud, good-natured, full of money that will vanish by dawn. They play cards while you and Annie bring drinks. You've learned the rhythm of their jokes, the way laughter can swing from friendly to cruel in a breath. But tonight it stays light. One of them, a red-bearded man with surprisingly kind eyes, asks you to sit with him. You from London? He says, shuffling his cards lazily. You shake your head. Country? Miss it? Sometimes. Depends on the weather. He chuckles. Fair enough. Out there, the mud eats your boots. In here, it's just cleaner mud, eh? You grin. At least the city mud doesn't try to swallow you whole. He laughs so hard he nearly spills his beer. It's a good sound. For a few moments, you feel almost human in his company. Less a transaction, more a conversation. He loses the next hand and shrugs, tossing his last coin onto the table. Oh well, he says. Can't take it with you. True. You say softly. But it's nice to pretend you can. Historians still argue whether women, like you, ever formed true friendships with their clients. Some say no, that it was always business. Others believe there were fleeting moments of genuine warmth, small acts of kindness that blurred the line between trade and tenderness. You've decided the debate doesn't matter. Whatever this is, it keeps the night gentle, and that's enough. When the men leave, You find a small scrap of paper left on the table. A rough sketch of a ship. Waves curling beneath it, and at the bottom, a single word, someday. You fold it carefully and slip it into your corset. Not because it means anything, but because it does. Later, as you help tidy up, Mrs. Blackwell counts the coins. "A fair night," she says, nodding. "No trouble, no constables, and everyone paid. That's as close to heaven as we get." You smile faintly, sweeping the floor. Heaven, you think, probably smells less like spilled beer and more like freedom. But who can say? Upstairs, the air feels warmer than usual. Annie's already asleep, her hair spread like gold on the pillow. You lie down beside her, holding the folded paper in your hand. The ink has smudged a little, but the lines still make sense. Outside, the city breathes, 1,000 hearts beating beneath the fog. Somewhere, the lamplighter snuffs his final flame. You whisper the word on the paper to yourself. Someday. It feels fragile, but you let it live in your mouth for a moment longer before sleep takes you. The following morning, sunlight creeps timidly across the room, sneaking through cracks like it's afraid to be caught here. Annie stirs first, yawning, the imprint of the pillow still on her cheek. "You're smiling in your sleep again," she murmurs. "Was I?" you ask, blinking yourself awake. "Yeah, must have been a good dream." You want to tell her about the sketch, the ship called Someday, but it feels too small, too silly to say aloud. Instead, you shrug. "Just a dream, I suppose." Downstairs, Mrs. Blackwell is already setting the day in motion. The smell of boiled coffee and starch fills the air. The girls drift in one by one, sleepy but obedient. "Boozy week ahead," the madam says, snapping her ledger shut. The inspector's sniffing around again. "So mind yourselves. No drunks in the doorway, no singing out the windows. We're a boarding house, remember. Respectable ladies." You nod with the others. Though respectable has started to sound like a costume that never quite fits. After breakfast, you volunteer to run errands again. Fresh air, even when it smells like coal and horses, feels like a small miracle. You tuck your shawl around your shoulders and head toward Covent Garden, where flower girls shout over one another, and the street musicians try to outplay the noise. A mainstream historical fact. By the late 19th century, London's markets weren't just for trade. They were stages of survival. The same alleys that sold tulips and tobacco also sold the illusion of better lives. Respectable women shopped there by day, unrespectable ones prowled there by night. The city didn't change, only the lighting did. You buy a few cheap flowers for the parlor, white daisies, slightly wilted, but still cheerful. The flower girl eyes you knowingly. "For the house?" she asks. You nod. "They'll make it smell less like men," she says with a grin, handing over an extra stem. You give her a coin and a quiet thank you. On your way back, you pass a notice posted on a brick wall Pausaride en Mo. "I'll hatapel, Savara Aristed." The ink is fresh. You stop for a moment, heart sinking. "Wasn't us." A newsboy nearby says, seeing your face. "Different district." Still, the thought lingers. A raid can cross streets faster than gossip. Back at the house, Mrs. Blackwell is pacing. "Keep those curtains drawn tonight," she instructs. "If any officer knocks, we're quiet boarders, got it?" Arnie frowns. "What if they search anyway?" "Then we smile," the madam says calmly. "And pray they're too lazy to look under the floorboards." You glance instinctively toward your room, the tin with your hidden coins under the loose plank. The thought of a constable's boot cracking it open sends a cold tremor down your spine. The afternoon drags by in nervous stillness. No music, no laughter. Just the faint hum of carriages outside. You spend the hours mending a torn curtain, the needle darting like a small promise in your hand. Do you ever think about leaving? Annie whispers suddenly. You pause, the needle halfway through cloth. Sometimes. What would you do? You exhale slowly. Maybe work in a shop. Or sue. Anything with daylight. She smiles dreamily. I'd have a bakery. Nothing fancy, just bread, warm and honest. You laugh softly. Warm bread's a better dream than most. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you work. The Victorians believed that sewing by candlelight could ruin a woman's moral character, as if the strain on her eyes might tempt her into sin. You decide they'd faint if they saw your life, candlelight and all. When evening falls, Mrs. Blackwell gives one last warning. Quiet night tonight. We'll keep it small. No singing, no rowdy guests. The house seems to agree. The usual laughter is muted, the lights turned low. A handful of regulars arrive, polite men who know how to whisper. One, a teacher with tired eyes, brings a small book of poetry. You ever read Browning? He asks. You shake your head. He flips through the pages. There's one about love that hides in plain sight. He says it's like dust. You only see it when the sun hits it just right. You smile faintly. Then maybe love's safer in the dark. He looks at you then, truly looks, and for a moment, the noise of the room fades. He closes the book gently, places a coin on the table, and leaves. No words, no promises. Just a quiet exchange between two people too tired to pretend otherwise. Historians still argue whether such tenderness in brothels was real or imagined. Whether affection could exist where money passed hands. But you know better. Some nights, the smallest kindness feels more genuine than any vow. Later, the street outside fills with the distant cry of whistles. Police again, maybe blocks away, maybe closer. The madam moves quickly, dozing lamps and hissing for silence. You hold your breath, heart hammering. Boots echo in the street. A knock sounds 2 doors down. Then, after a long pause, nothing. Just the soft, collective exhale of relief. Mrs. Blackwell mutters, "Close call," and pours herself a brandy. London's full of them these days. Every week, another house gone. Where do they go? Elsie asks quietly. Wherever the city forgets to look, the madam replies. When the tension eases, Annie takes out a small piece of chalk and draws a tiny flower on the wall behind the parlor door. A secret mark only the girls will see. For luck, she whispers. You trace it with your fingertip, half believing. By midnight, the danger feels distant again. The city outside hums its usual lullaby. Carriages' laughter, the faint bark of dogs. You lean by the window, watching fog roll across the lamplight. In moments like this, London looks almost kind. The rooftops fade into cloud. The world seems half asleep, and the air smells faintly of rain. You imagine the ship someday sailing through that mist, its sails pale as linen, carrying you somewhere quieter. Historians will one day say that women like you were lost, forgotten, erased by polite society. Maybe they're right. But tonight, you're still here, breathing, thinking, dreaming in the cracks of the world that never wanted to see you. You climb into bed just before dawn. Annie murmurs something half coherent in her sleep, and you whisper back without knowing what words you use. The room is cold, the future uncertain, but your small stash of coins still waits under the floorboard, and for now, that's enough to call this survival. The next morning greets you with a drizzle so fine it seems stitched into the air. Silver threads glistening over the rooftops. The world outside feels muffled, washed clean of the previous night's tension, though you know better. London never truly cleans itself. It just rearranges its dirt. You pull on your shawl and step quietly downstairs. The house smells faintly of damp wood and last night's candles. Mrs. Blackwell's voice drifts from the parlor, low and measured. She's talking with a man. A constable by the look of his cap resting on the table. You pause, heart tightening. Just a misunderstanding, she's saying smoothly. My girls are respectable boarders. You'll find no indecency here. The constable grunts. We've had complaints from the neighbors. Lights on late, men coming and going. Visitors, not clients. She insists, her tone sugared. Widows and seamstresses must have friends too. Officer. You catch a glimpse of her through the doorway, composed, smiling, a chess player mid-move. The constable finally nods. Pocketing the coin she's slipped across the table. Best keep it quiet, he mutters, or I'll have to make a report. Of course, officer. Thank you for your discretion. When he leaves, she exhales, rubbing her temples. Parasites, the lot of them. The men in blue cost more than the men in bed. You step inside, feigning casualness. He gone. For now, she sighs. They always come back when the papers need a story. A mainstream historical fact, Victorian brothels, often existed under uneasy truces with the police. Raids were selective, bribes were common, and morality was flexible so long as coins changed hands. London's constables liked to say they were keeping order. The truth was, they were managing a business arrangement. Mrs. Blackwell gives you a look. Softer than usual. You're clever, girl. Keep your head down and your savings close. These laws change like weather. You nod, understanding the warning beneath the advice. By afternoon, the rain eases into a thin mist. You and Annie are sent out to fetch more gin and candles. The errand feels almost luxurious. A chance to walk freely through the streets, to pretend you belong to them. Annie links her arm through yours as you step over puddles. Heard what the constable said, she whispers. Every word? You reply. She shakes her head. Funny, isn't it? They say they're protecting women, but I don't see them protecting anyone but themselves. Protection's a business, you say. Same as ours. You both laugh quietly at that. You stop by the candle maker first, a narrow shop that smells of beeswax and smoke. The owner, a kindly widow named Mrs. Pritchard, greets you with her usual nod. Fresh batch just cooled, she says. Good light. Won't sputter. Annie picks up a small stub and grins. Almost too nice for our parlour. Nice things remind you you're human, Mrs. Pritchard says simply. Don't forget that. Her words follow you out into the fog. At the gin shop, you hand over coins and receive 2 corked bottles wrapped in brown paper. The shopkeeper, a barrel-chested man with a smile like old brass, winks. Tell your mistress I'll send the better stock next week. Assuming her payments stay prompt. They always are. You reply evenly. Good girl, he says, not unkindly. You and Annie walk home slowly, each step measured to keep the bottles from clinking. Sometimes I think everyone in this city's in debt to everyone else, she muses. Probably true, you say. Even the Queen owes someone something. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Queen Victoria herself once had her undergarments washed in a private facility to prevent servants from selling scraps of her laundry for souvenirs. Londoners would pay handsomely for even a shred of royal petticoat. The thought makes you laugh aloud. Imagine if people fought over our corsets, you say. Annie giggles. They'd trip over themselves to avoid them. When you return, Mrs. Blackwell's mood has softened. Relief often does that. She counts the candles, eyes the gin, and then nods. Well done. You'll both take the front room tonight. We've got new visitors. Gentlemen from the theatre district. Theatre men, you've learned, are a breed apart. Full of stories, vanity, and perfume. They treat the world like a play and themselves as its stars. Night arrives with a quiet shimmer. The fog outside deepens into mystery, and inside, the parlour fills with laughter, music, and cigarette smoke curling like lazy ghosts. One of the theatre men, a slender fellow with silver hair and eyes too sharp for comfort, takes an interest in you. You've the face of a tragedy, he says. Or a heroine. You laugh lightly. Depends who's writing the play. He leans closer. And who gets the applause? He quotes poetry between sips of brandy, lines from Tennyson and Swinburne. You recognize some from the schoolroom years ago. Funny how words can follow you from innocence to infamy without changing their tone. Tell me, he says, what keeps you here? You tilt your head, pretending to think. The rent's cheap and the company lively. He grins. Ah, the humor of the fallen! You know, I could put you on stage with that wit. The audience would weep for you. Would they pay as well as you do? You ask. He laughs so hard he spills his drink. Touche, darling. You've a sharper tongue than half the actresses I know. Historians still argue whether brothel women ever crossed into the world of the stage. Whether their wit and presence found homes in theatre tropes or cabarets. Some records suggest they did, under new names and new lives. You wonder if that could ever be you, performing under lights that don't flicker from fear. The night winds down gently. The men leave with flushed cheeks and empty purses. Mrs. Blackwell is pleased, humming as she writes in her ledger. Well done, all of you. No nonsense, plenty of coin. You slip your share into your pocket, heart steady. Upstairs, you add one more coin to the tin under the floorboard. The clink feels satisfying, almost holy. Annie peeks in as you're about to lie down. How much now? She whispers. Enough for a ticket, you say without thinking. To where? You smile softly. Anywhere, she nods, understanding without words. As you drift toward sleep, rain begins again, tapping lightly against the window. The city outside hums like a distant engine, steady and indifferent. You think of the theatre man's words, the face of a tragedy, and decide he was wrong. You're not a tragedy, you're an unfinished story, still being written, still choosing its ending one coin at a time. Historians will call this survival. You, half asleep, call it hope. By the time the sun pushes through the coal haze the next morning, the house already hums with whispers. Someone's crying softly 2 rooms over. Someone else is laughing too loudly, the kind of laughter that tries to outrun its own exhaustion. You sit up, listening, letting the sounds sort themselves into stories. Rivalries and alliances. That's what Mrs. Blackwell calls them. 2 sides of the same cracked mirror. You've learned that in this house, affection and resentment live as neighbors. They share the same teapot and borrow each other's comms. Annie sits at the foot of your bed, hair tangled, nursing a bruise on her wrist. Liz and Clara nearly clawed each other's eyes out last night. She says, "What for this time?" Some lordling gave Clara his gold watch chain. Liz swears it should have been hers. Mrs. Blackwell broke it up before blood hit the carpet. You nod. Nothing in this house ever happens without reason, though the reasons are rarely noble. The gold watch chain will probably end up in the pawn shop by noon. The quarrel half forgotten by supper. A mainstream historical fact floats through your thoughts. In many Victorian brothels, women formed their own informal hierarchies. Senior, house girls, claiming better rooms, richer clients, and more freedom. The madam kept peace not by fairness, but by managing pride like a gambler manages cards. Annie sighs. Do you ever think we'd all get along if we weren't competing for the same air? You finish. Exactly. You stretch, rubbing your eyes. Competition's all that keeps some of us breathing. She laughs, short and dry. And here I thought it was the gin. By mid-morning, the house settles into a rhythm of chores. Beds remade, floors swept, linens boiled. The scent of soap and lavender cuts through the lingering smoke. The women move around each other like planets in orbit. Close, cautious, beautiful from afar. Liz, the fiery one, catches your eye as she polishes a mirror. You and Annie are thick as thieves these days, she says. You smile neutral. We help each other. Her reflection meets yours. Just don't help her more than she deserves. She's been known to step on friends, when the door to a better room opens. The words are honeyed, but the warning underneath is real. You thank her mildly, then move on. In this world, gossip is both currency and camouflage. You learn to accept it with a shrug. Later that afternoon, you're assigned to prepare the upstairs parlor. That means polishing the brass, dusting the lamps, and replacing the wilting flowers in the corner vase. Annie joins you, humming under her breath. Liz warned me about you, you say lightly. She warns everyone about everyone, Annie says, arranging lilies. It's how she flirts. You both laugh, a small sound that warms the stale air. Still, the tension hums like static beneath your laughter. You've seen friendships here spark fast and burn faster, especially when money or men are involved. That evening, the house fills early. It's payday at the shipyard, and sailors flood the district like a rising tide. Mrs. Blackwell divides the guests evenly, but luck, or design, puts both you and Annie in the same room with two particularly boisterous sailors. They're harmless enough, though one insists on juggling the candlesticks, and the other keeps shouting the wrong lyrics to sea shanties. Annie teases them. You keep the peace. And for a while it's almost fun, until one of the men pulls a small locket from his pocket. A silver one with a blue stone, and tells Annie he'll give it to whichever last sings the prettiest. Annie begins a tune you know well. The water is wide, her voice soft but strong. The sailors clap along. When she finishes, the locket is hers. You smile and applaud, though something sharp curls beneath your ribs. Not jealousy exactly, but the familiar ache of invisibility. Afterward, Annie finds you in the hallway. You're quiet, she says. Just tired. She studies you for a moment, then presses the locket into your hand. Yeah. You wear it tonight. It looks better on you anyway. You shake your head. No, it's yours. She smiles gentle. Then keep it safe for me. I'll just lose it by morning. It's a small gesture, but it eases something inside you. Revelry may spark easily here, but so does grace. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind as you handle the locket. Some Victorian women, especially those in disreputable trades, carried lockets filled not with lovers' portraits, but with snippets of newspaper clippings, advertisements, lost, pet notices, bits of poems, a talisman of tiny, borrowed dreams. You wonder what Annie might hide inside hers if she could. The night stretches on, thick with laughter and music. You serve wine, smile, and dance a little when asked. The sailors eventually stumble out, lighter in pockets and heavier in spirits. In the quiet that follows, the women gather in the parlor, boots off, corsets loosened. Liz sits on the floor, her red hair coming undone. You know, she says, for all the fighting, I'd rather be here than scrubbing some lord's laundry. Clara nods. At least here, we own our misery. Do we? You ask. She shrugs. Maybe not. But we rent it cheap. Everyone laughs, even Mrs. Blackwell, who's counting coins at the table. Historians still argue whether women in brothels found genuine friendship, or only fragile alliances born of necessity. Some memoirs hint at sisterhood, others at constant betrayal. The truth, you think, lies somewhere in the middle, between kindness and survival, between sharing a meal and hiding your last coin. When the others drift away, you linger with Annie by the window. The fog outside glows with lamplight, turning the street into something almost pretty. Do you ever think we'll leave? She asks softly. Every day. And if you do? You glance at the locket in your palm, feeling its cool weight. I'll find you first, you say. She grins, eyes tired but bright. Then I'd better stay put. You both laugh, and the sound feels lighter than it should. As the clock ticks toward midnight, the house grows still. You slip the locket beneath your pillow and close your eyes. The laughter, the rivalries, the whispered warnings, they fade into the soft rhythm of the rain. In the darkness, you realize something simple but certain. Friendship here isn't about trust or loyalty. It's about endurance. About standing side by side in a storm. Even if you both know you're only sheltering each other for the night. You drift off with that thought, a strange comfort blooming in your chest. Like warmth from a shared flame that refuses to go out. Morning arrives grey and yawning, a slow leak of light through the soot-streaked window. You wake to the faint murmur of voices downstairs, Mrs. Blackwell scolding someone, then the scrape of a chair, then quiet again. The air smells faintly of starch and tea leaves. You sit up, stretch, and remember the locket under your pillow. It's still there, cold, real, a small proof that kindness hasn't entirely gone extinct inside these walls. Annie's already up, buttoning her dress. Her hair's a mess, but her eyes are alive with mischief. You heard, she whispers. Clara's leaving. You blink. Leaving where? Off to the country. Says she's marrying a client. Some widower with a tobacco shop. You raise an eyebrow, and she believes him. Arnie shrugs. He gave her a ring. That counts for something. You don't reply. You've seen these stories before. Each one dressed like a fairy tale. Each one ending the same way. With tears, rumors, and someone else sleeping in the empty bed by the end of the week. Still, a part of you wants to believe it might be true. That someone might get a second act. That one of you could make it out without a scandal stitched to your name. Mrs. Blackwell appears in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Breakfast in 10, she says. And keep the hallway clear. Clara's suitor's coming. You exchange a look with Annie. It's the kind of moment that could tilt either toward envy or hope. You decide to choose hope, at least for the morning. A mainstream historical fact. While Victorian society publicly condemned women in the sex trade, many men from respectable classes quietly kept long-term arrangements with them. Some even married their favorites. Court records and parish gossip columns alike tell stories of reformed women who managed to slip into middle-class anonymity. Of course, for every success, there were 10 heartbreaks. Historians still argue whether such marriages were acts of love or rescue, or simply extensions of power. You head downstairs to watch the scene unfold. Clara stands in the parlor, wearing her best dress, her hair glossy and pinned high. The man beside her looks older, maybe 45, with soft hands and a stiff collar. He smiles in that cautious way of men who want to look generous. You're certain? Mrs. Blackwell asks, her voice low. I am, Clara says, chin high. He's offered me a home. I'm done with the life. And Mrs. Blackwell studies her a long moment, then nods. Then go. But don't come back crying when the fairy tale goes sour. I won't, Clara says, though her voice trembles a little. The man tips his hat. Good day, ladies. And just like that, she's gone. Her trunk trundling down the steps, the door shutting behind her. Annie exhales. You think she'll make it? I hope she does, you say. Annie laughs softly. You'd make a terrible cynic. You grin. Only on weekends. Later that day, you're sent to the grocer's to fetch bread and tea. It's one of those rare moments of ordinary freedom. Walking among shopkeepers, pretending you're just another face. You pass a line of mothers shepherding children in and out of schoolhouses, their chatter floating like birdsong. You wonder, for a heartbeat, what it would feel like to hold a child's hand instead of a stranger's coin. Children. The word sits heavy in your mind. You've seen women here give birth, weep, disappear. You've seen midwives arrive under cover of night and leave with small bundles that no one mentions again. Mrs. Blackwell runs her house clean, respectable by the district's crooked standards. But even respectability can't stop biology. When you return, you find Liz sitting by the window, staring into the street. She's pale, chewing her lip. You all right? you ask. She looks up, eyes wet. No, I'm late. You understand instantly. Have you told her? You ask. Liz shakes her head. Not yet. She'll send me off to that charity home on Church Lane. The one where they make you scrub floors until the baby comes. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some of those charity homes, the so-called Magdalene institutions, offered women a strange mix of punishment and mercy. They made them renounce their sin, wash laundry for 12 hours a day, and then, after birth, offered to adopt out their children in exchange for spiritual redemption. The women rarely saw their babies again. You touch Liz's arm. Maybe there's another way. There's never another way, she whispers. Only quieter ones. You say nothing. Sometimes silence is the only kindness left. That night, Liz is gone. No one says where, but everyone knows. Annie lights a candle for her on the mantel, and Mrs. Blackwell lets it burn. Over the next few weeks, a heaviness settles over the house. The laughter grows thinner, the music quieter. Even the clients seem less rowdy, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. And then, one cold evening, something unexpected happens. A small boy, no more than 8, appears at the front door, clutching a letter. His boots are muddy, his hair a mess. For Miss Annie, he says shyly. Annie kneels, takes the envelope. Who sent you, love? A lady, he says, at the corner by the pump. She said I'd get a sweet if I ran fast. She hands him a penny, and he scampers away. Annie opens the letter carefully. You lean over her shoulder to read. It's from Clara. Dearest girls, I made it to Bristol. He's kind, and his shop smells like cedar and tobacco. He says he'll teach me the trade. I wanted you to know there's hope after all. Save your money. Keep your heads high. The world's wider than those 4 rooms. Yours always. Clara. Annie wipes her eyes. She did it. She says softly. She really did. You smile. Though part of you wonders if the letter will be the last you ever hear from her. Still, hope is hope, even secondhand. Later that night, you and Annie sit by the fire, sharing a stolen apple and speaking in half whispers. Would you ever want a child? She asks suddenly. You hesitate. Once, maybe. Before I knew how much the world costs. She nods. Matu. Silence stretches. The fire pops, sending tiny sparks into the air. Historians still argue whether motherhood among women in the trade was viewed as a burden or a hidden form of empowerment. Some records suggest they created informal childcare networks. Older women minding the infants of younger ones. Others describe secrecy, loss, and a deep ache that rarely found words. You imagine such a network. Babies rocked in borrowed cradles, women pooling coins for milk, laughter cutting through despair. Maybe it exists somewhere, in a kinder version of this life. When you finally go to bed, the letter to Clara rests folded beneath your pillow, beside Annie's locket. 2 tiny relics of possibility. Outside, the city hums. Omnivorous, endless, indifferent. But tonight, you feel a sliver of peace. Maybe love isn't gone. Maybe it just takes different shapes. Here a letter, a locket, a candle that burns for someone who might never return. By the time the next week rolls in, the brothel hums with an energy you can almost taste. Part boredom, part anticipation. It's payday again for the dock workers, and the parlour smells faintly of polish and pipe smoke. You're brushing dust off the mantel when Annie bursts through the door holding a crumpled newspaper. Have you seen this? She says breathlessly, waving it like a victory flag. You shake your head. What now? Another scandal in Parliament. Better, she grins. Listen to this. Murder in Whitechapel, local girl found in alleyway. You blink. That's better. She laughs nervously. No, wait. There's more. It says she worked at Madame Lacey's 2 streets over. You know, that noisy place with the red shutters. You nod. Everyone in the district knows Madame Lacey's. Fancier than Mrs. Blackwell's, but twice as cruel. She was called Mary Jane. Annie says, I think I've seen her. Dark hair, gap in her teeth. She used to trade gossip with our cook. You take the paper, read the brief article. It's short, sensational, and dismissive. The sort of story that treats a woman's death as an evening's diversion. The last line calls her a poor unfortunate of the lowest order. You feel your stomach twist. Lowest order. You repeat softly. As if her blood ran cheaper than theirs. Annie frowns. They never write about who she was. Only what she was. A mainstream historical fact. Newspapers in the late Victorian period regularly published lurid accounts of crimes in the East End, especially those involving sex workers. Sensationalism sold. The public devoured such stories with both moral outrage and voyeuristic curiosity, their empathy fading by the final paragraph. You fold the paper and set it aside. Let's not feed it more attention, you say. The walls already whisper enough. Because they do whisper. In a house like this, information travels faster than the wind. A single rumor can start in the kitchen and reach the attic before the kettle boils. News from other houses, talk of clients, scandals, even politics. All of it drifts in with the visitors and lingers like smoke. After dinner, Mrs. Blackwell gathers everyone in the parlor. She holds her teacup like a scepter. There'll be no gossiping about that murder, she says sharply. Fear draws the wrong sort of attention. We keep our heads down and our mouths shut. Liz mutters, the dead deserve to be remembered. A Mrs. Blackwell's gaze cuts sharp. Then light a candle in private. Don't invite ghosts to supper. The room falls silent. Later, you and Annie sit by the window upstairs, watching fog curl around the lampposts. She's scared, Annie says. Of what? Of being next on the list. Of seeing her name in the paper someday. You nod. Everyone is, even you. To chase the dark mood away. Annie rummages through her drawer and pulls out a stack of broadsheets and pamphlets she's collected. Some romantic, some political, some simply absurd. Listen to this, she says, reading aloud from one. The modern woman must educate herself to resist the degeneracy of vice. You laugh softly. Sounds like something written by a man who's never done laundry. Annie flips to another. London's Fallen Daughters. How the Salvation Army redeems the sinful. That one again. You groan. Do they never tire of saving people who didn't ask for saving? She grins. It's entertaining, at least. Like serialized fiction, but guiltier. The two of you spend an hour reading snippets aloud, giggling over the most melodramatic lines. It's your secret kind of rebellion. Mocking the words that would define you, twisting them into bedtime jokes. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Victorian newspapers often reuse typefaces from serialized novels to print moral reform tracts, meaning that the same fonts used for adventure stories also warned against female degradation. You can't help but find the irony delicious. The next few days, more gossip floats in. New plays opening in the West End. A duchess caught with her footman, a factory strike near the docks. You realize, slowly, that your world isn't as small as it feels. The walls hum with news, but also with ideas. Snippets of politics, poetry, and dreams stitched together from overheard conversations. One night, a client, a quiet gentleman with ink, stained fingers, tells you he writes for a newspaper. Ever read the Times? He asks, pride in his voice. Once, you say. They print words like sermons. You laughs. You've a sharp tongue. We could use more honesty like that in print. You raise an eyebrow. You'd have to pay extra for it. He smiles, a little sadly. Honesty's already too expensive. Historians still argue whether brothel workers played an unacknowledged role in spreading information across class lines. Some scholars claim they were unofficial news networks. passing stories from merchants to laborers to politicians in the space of a single night. Others dismiss it as romantic myth-making. You're not sure what's true, but you've seen how a whispered secret can travel across districts by morning. Perhaps, in your own quiet way, you are part of history's bloodstream. A few nights later, the house hosts a group of theatre men again. They're loud, charming, full of gossip from the stage. One of them, an actor with black curls, regales you all with tales of rehearsals gone wrong. They say the Prime Minister himself came to the matinee, he declares dramatically. Fell asleep halfway through Othello, poor man. Must have been the iambic pentameter that did him in. Everyone laughs. You serve them brandy and listen, the sound of their voices weaving through the air like music. For a few hours, you forget the cold and the hunger outside. As the night wears thin, one of the men recites a poem he claims to have written. The lamps are low, the streets are grey. The dreamers wake, the saints decay, and still she walks, with borrowed grace, through London's heart, its hidden face. You hold your breath. It's lovely, in a tragic sort of way. When he finishes, the room is quiet. Then Mrs. Blackwell claps once. "Very pretty, dear," she says. "Now who's paying for the next round?" Laughter bursts out again, breaking the spell. But the poem lingers with you long after the men leave. Later, in your room, you write it down from memory on a scrap of paper. It feels like a secret worth keeping, something fragile that belongs to no one but you. Annie peeks in. Still awake. Couldn't sleep. You say. Too many words stuck in my head. She smiles. That's the trouble with thinking people. We're always dangerous. You tuck the poem under the locket and the letter, your small archive of borrowed truths. Downstairs, the last of the candles gutters out. The house sighs, settling into its midnight silence. Outside, London breathes too, heavy, restless. Alive with stories that will never make the papers. And you, half asleep, realize that for all the city's cruelty, you've found something rare here. A chorus of voices, gossip and poetry and laughter all braided together, reminding you that even in the dimmest rooms, words still have wings. Morning trickles through a crack in the curtains, pale and listless. The first sound you hear is the church bell, a slow, solemn toll that seeps into your bones. Sundays in this part of London are quieter. Even sin, it seems, keeps the Sabbath. You sit up, stretch, and catch a glimpse of Annie sitting cross-legged by the window, humming to herself as she cleans her nails with a pin. A faint breeze lifts the lace of the curtain, carrying the distant scent of smoke and bread. Mrs. Blackwell says we're to behave today, Annie says. No shouting from windows, no music before noon. You grin. Respectability hour. Something like that. The reform ladies are doing their rounds again. You sigh. Of course they are. Every few weeks. Well, meaning women from the local church, or sometimes from the temperance societies, wander into the district, armed with pamphlets and pity. They knock on doors, offer prayers, and leave behind tracts warning of moral decline. You've learned to smile, curtsy, and close the door quickly. A mainstream historical fact, during the late Victorian period, religious and reform movements flourished in England, targeting prostitution as a moral and public health issue. The Contagious Diseases Acts had given police broad powers to detain suspected women for medical inspection. Later repealed after feminist protests, they left behind a bitter legacy of surveillance and shame. By mid-morning, the first knock comes. You exchange a look with Annie and descend the stairs together. Mrs. Blackwell opens the door, composed and smiling. On the step stand two women in crisp bonnets, faces glowing with the certainty of righteousness. One holds a basket of tracts. The other carries a small tin of biscuits labelled for the redeemed. "Good morning, madam," says the taller one. Well, come on behalf of the Society for the Rescue of Fallen Women. Mrs. Blackwell's smile doesn't waver. How kind. But my girls are neither fallen nor lost, only resting between employments. The woman blinks, uncertain whether to take offense or pity. Surely you understand, Mrs. Blackwell. Salvation is for all who seek it. I quite agree, she says sweetly. Which is why my girls attend to it privately. Would you like to leave a donation envelope? For the orphans. The reformer hesitates. Perhaps we could come in. Speak to the girls directly. Not without a warrant, Mrs. Blackwell replies, shutting the door with graceful finality. You and Annie collapse into silent laughter as soon as the latch clicks. She's brilliant, Annie whispers. I swear she could charm the devil out of his horns. And Mrs. Blackwell turns, eyes glinting. That's the idea. Still, the visit leaves a residue of unease. You can't help thinking about those women and their soft voices, their certainty. Maybe, in another life, you'd have worn a bonnet too, knocking on doors and saving souls that didn't ask for saving. Annie seems to read your mind. Do you ever wish they could save us? You shrug. Depends what they mean by saving. A sermon won't pay rent. Maybe they just want us to be good, she says softly. You look at her, then at the cracked mirror above the mantel. We're good enough for surviving. That evening, as the church bells toll vespers, a new visitor arrives. Not a reformer this time, but a clergyman. Young, awkward, eyes full of sympathy and something else. Perhaps curiosity. He introduces himself as Reverend Hale. Mrs. Blackwell eyes him coolly. You're not here to lecture, are you? Not at all, he says. I serve at St. Dunstan's. We've begun a new initiative. Education classes for women seeking new employment. Reading, arithmetic, and scripture. Annie perks up. Reading lessons. Yes, he says, visibly encouraged. You'd be most welcome. Monday evenings. You exchange a glance with her. Would we have to repent first? He hesitates. Repentance is always encouraged, of course, but not a requirement. Then we'll think about it. You say. The Reverend bows slightly, relief softening his features. I'll leave a pamphlet. God bless you both. When he's gone, Annie grins. You're thinking about it, aren't you? Maybe. You admit. Couldn't hurt to learn something new. Mrs. Blackwell snorts. Careful, girls. Too much education, and you'll start asking for fair wages. That night, you lie awake, staring at the ceiling. The thought of a classroom. Ink, stained desks, chalk dust. The clean scent of paper. Feels almost magical. You picture yourself writing your own name in proper script, no longer hiding behind an alias. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some Victorian reform schools, women were taught not just reading and sewing, but posture. How to stand with moral rectitude, as if virtue could be measured in spine alignment. You imagine yourself trying to balance both literacy and ladylike angles, and almost laugh aloud. Monday arrives damp and grey. You and Annie decide to go. The church basement smells of wax and damp stone. Reverend Hale greets you with shy enthusiasm. A few other women sit at long tables, some from neighbouring houses, others from laundries or the streets. The lesson is simple: alphabet, numbers, short verses. You surprise yourself by remembering more than you expected. Annie struggles with the letters, tongue between her teeth, and you help her trace them. Look at you, she whispers. A proper schoolmistress. Don't let Mrs. Blackwell hear, you whisper back. She'll charge extra. For an hour, the world feels different. The clatter of pens, the rustle of paper. It's a kind of quiet that heals. You see the Reverend watching, smiling faintly. Not pity, you realize. Respect. On the walk home, the air smells of rain and coal. You think he really means to help us? Annie asks. You shrug. Maybe. Or maybe he just likes the sound of redemption. Historians still argue whether religious reformers truly improved the lives of women in the sex trade or merely reshaped their misery. Some accounts praise their efforts to provide housing and education. Others accuse them of moral policing disguised as charity. Whatever the truth, you know this much: the hour you spent learning your letters felt more real than all their sermons. That evening, the house feels lighter. Liz hums while mending a hem. Mrs. Blackwell smiles almost fondly at Annie's crooked handwriting on a scrap of paper. "You two keep this up," she says. "And you'll be running a library before long," Annie grins. "Imagine. Books instead of clients. Better company," you say. Mrs. Blackwell chuckles. "Books don't tip." You laugh with her, but as the night deepens, the laughter fades into thought. Books don't tip, but they also don't lie. They don't bruise. They don't vanish by morning. Later, as you prepare for bed, Annie asks quietly, "You think there's forgiveness for us?" You turn to her. Forgiveness from who? God, the world, ourselves. You think for a long moment. I think forgiveness is just another word for rest, and we'll get some one day. She nods, satisfied with that. The candle burns low, its flame bending with the draft. You listen to the rain against the window, steady as prayer. The city outside doesn't change, but inside, something shifts. A small fierce hope that learning, even in a church basement, might lead somewhere. Maybe redemption isn't about leaving the past behind. Maybe it's about writing your name clearly enough that, for once, the world has to read it. It happens quietly, almost by accident. You don't plan your escape, you drift toward it. The way a boat finds the current it's meant to follow. The weeks after the church lessons settle into a strange rhythm. Work at night. Lessons when you can manage them. A few stolen hours of reading by candlelight. You're beginning to recognize words on shop signs, on bills, even on the gossip papers left behind by customers. The world feels a fraction more decipherable, as if someone had wiped fog off a window. Annie jokes that you'll be writing novels soon. Mrs. Blackwell smirks. If she does, she'd better use a false name. No one wants to buy a book by a woman with a past. You grin, but her words land heavy. Everyone here has a past, and very few have a future. It starts with a rumor. One of the older girls, Kitty, whispers that there's a tailor's shop near Whitechapel looking for a seamstress. The pay's poor, the hours long, but the work is respectable. You could do that, Annie says one afternoon, half teasing. You've got nimble fingers. Need a reference, you say. And who'd give me one? Mrs. Blackwell might. You snort. A brothel madam's letter of recommendation. That'll open doors. Still, the thought lingers. The tailor's shop. The possibility, slim, absurd, but real. A mainstream historical fact in late Victorian England. Some women did manage to leave the sex trade through charity homes, or paying work in laundries and dressmaking shops. But the leap was precarious. Without savings or references, many found themselves returning to the streets within months. You decide to try anyway. Mrs. Blackwell raises an eyebrow when you tell her. You want to leave. Eventually, you say. Just want to see if I could. She studies you, the way she does when assessing a client's sincerity. Most girls who go chasing respectability end up back here, poorer and hungrier. Then I'll just have to be the exception. After a long pause, she sighs. Fine. I'll write you something, nothing fancy. Just says you worked as a domestic helper. You smile. That'll do. A week later, you walk to Whitechapel with your forged letter and your heart pounding. The tailor, a stooped man with silver-rimmed spectacles, barely looks at you before muttering, "We've already got enough girls." You thank him, step outside, and lean against the wall, letting the disappointment settle like soot. Annie finds you later and squeezes your arm. "You tried," she says. "That's something." "Not enough," you reply. But that night, as you lace your corset, a strange calm fills you. You realize escape isn't one big moment. It's a series of small decisions, practiced quietly, until the door finally opens. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Some women used coded advertisements in Victorian newspapers to find discreet work after leaving brothels. Phrases like experienced companion, seeks position in quiet household, hid lives rewritten in tiny print. You imagine slipping your own ad into a paper one day, your history reduced to a single delicate line. Weeks pass. Business slows as winter thickens. Mrs. Blackwell grows irritable about coal prices. Liz coughs constantly. Annie dreams of leaving London altogether. "You think we could go to the seaside?" she asks one night, eyes distant. "Find a boarding house that needs help. Start over. Seaside air's good for the lungs." You say, "But we'd need money." "We'll find it." That's Annie. Reckless hope in human form. You love her for it. Then, one evening, a client, a middle-aged bookseller who smells of parchment and pipe smoke, asks if you ever read. You tell him you're learning. He seems genuinely impressed. "I could lend you something," he says, rummaging in his satchel. "You'd like this." He hands you a thin volume of poems by Christina Rossetti. Inside, the lines tremble with restrained sorrow and stubborn beauty. One verse catches you. "Better by far you should forget and smile, than that you should remember and be sad." You trace the words with your fingertip. Forget and smile. A week later, you tell Annie you're leaving. Her smile falters. "You mean it?" "Oh, do." She swallows hard. "Then I'm happy for you." Angry but happy. You laugh softly. That's fair. You pack your few things: a shawl, the poetry book, Mrs. Blackwell's forged reference, and a handful of coins. At dawn, you slip out quietly, pausing at the bottom of the stairs to touch the banister one last time. The street smells of frost and horse dung, familiar and foreign all at once. The tailor's shop still won't take you, but a bakery down the lane will. The owner, a widower with tired eyes, needs help kneading dough and sweeping floors. It's work, honest and exhausting, and you accept without hesitation. The first week is brutal. Your hands blister, your back aches, and the scent of yeast clings to your clothes. But the exhaustion feels clean. One morning, as you carry a tray of rolls to the counter, the church bells ring, and for the first time, they sound like something meant for you. Annie visits once, wrapped in a borrowed coat. You share tea behind the shop and talk of nothing much. Weather, gossip, the price of coal. When she leaves, she squeezes your hand. "Don't forget us," she says. "Never," as she grins. Then send word when you've written that novel. Historians still argue whether most women truly escaped, or whether society simply forgot them once they disappeared from police registers. Some may have married, others vanished into factory work, still others migrated abroad. Their names rarely survived in ledgers or archives. But maybe that was the point. Months pass. You save a little money. You rent a small room above the bakery. Sometimes, at night, you dream of the brothel, the velvet curtains, the laughter, the faces blurred by candlelight. You wake with a mix of grief and relief. One afternoon, a letter arrives. It's from Annie. Scrawled unevenly, blotted with ink, got a position in Brighton, washing linens. Sun's brighter here. You'd like it. The sea's cold but clean. Come if you can. You fold the letter, smile, and place it between the pages of Rossetti's poems. Maybe one day you'll go. Maybe you'll stay. Either way, the life you've built, fragile as it is, belongs to you now. And when you look in the mirror, no longer framed by velvet and rouge, but by flower dust and sunlight, you see someone else entirely. Not a fallen woman. Not a rescued one either. Just a person standing upright, breathing freely. with ink on her fingers and her own story to tell. By the time spring settles over London again, you've grown used to the sound of carts outside the bakery, the hiss of dough meeting hot brick, the easy rhythm of days that begin before dawn. There's a certain grace in routine. You still notice the brothel girls sometimes, bright silk skirts passing like exotic birds along the foggy street. But now, they feel like ghosts from another chapter of your life. The world around you, however, is stirring. Newspapers shout about reform, about women's rights, about politics. Even the men at the bakery talk about it when trade slows. The suffrage movement is swelling. Public health bills are being debated. The city buzzes with change, though not everyone agrees on what kind of change should come. One evening, after closing, the baker's daughter hands you a flyer she picked up from a rally. Meeting for the Rights of Women and the Protection of Working Girls. Westminster Hall. Tuesday, 7 p.m. Thought you might like it, she says with a grin. They talk about fair wages and laws for women. Some even say the Contagious Diseases Acts were wicked things. You pause, reading the words. Wicked, you murmur. Yes, that's one way to put it. The next Tuesday, curiosity wins. You walk to Westminster Hall, the air thick with the smell of coal smoke and carriage grease. Inside, the crowd hums. A mix of ladies in fine dresses, clerks in worn coats, even a few curious journalists scribbling notes. On stage stands a woman with sharp eyes and a strong voice. You recognize her name from the paper. Josephine Butler, the reformer who led the fight to repeal the Contagious Diseases Acts. Her speech is fierce, full of moral fire, but grounded in reason. England cannot call itself civilized, she declares, while one half of its women are condemned, and the other half are blind to it. The hall erupts in applause. You stand among strangers, heart-pounding, remembering every night you stood under gaslight, every door that closed in your face. The words feel aimed directly at you, yet they lift you instead of shaming you. A mainstream historical fact. Josephine Butler indeed spearheaded campaigns against the Contagious Diseases Acts in the 1860s and 1870s, arguing that they violated women's dignity and institutionalized exploitation. Her activism inspired both feminist and labor movements in Britain and beyond. As the speech ends, you find yourself speaking with a young typist who attends these meetings regularly. They say women will get the vote soon, she tells you. Can you imagine? Our own voices in Parliament. You smile faintly. Imagine that. You don't tell her that. For years, your own voice was something sold by the hour. Still, you start reading the pamphlets she gives you about suffrage, labor laws, public morality. Some of the language stings, some of it uplifts. A few writers call for the redemption of fallen sisters, but others, bolder, newer, speak of equality without pity. That distinction matters more than you expected. A quirky tidbit surfaces from the gossip pages. Some reform clubs held tea debates, where women gathered to discuss politics while pretending to gossip over pastries. Because public speaking was still considered unfeminine. You picture yourself there, balancing a teacup while dissecting social policy. The absurdity makes you smile. As summer rolls in, the bakery grows hot and heavy with yeast and sweat. On Sundays, you take walks through Hyde Park, where speakers mount wooden crates to rant about justice, wages, and the empire. Sometimes you linger, half listening, half dreaming. One day, near the Serpentine, a thin man with spectacles hands you another pamphlet. Meeting tonight. Public health lecture. You look like someone who listens. You almost laugh. That's a first. That evening, you attend. The lecturer, a medical reformer, argues for better sanitation, for recognizing disease as social, not moral. Poverty breeds sickness, he says, not sin. Historians still argue whether this shift, from moral condemnation to public health, truly helped working women, or simply replaced one kind of control with another. Some say it gave legitimacy to lives once branded immoral. Others argue it turned human suffering into statistics. As you listen, you can't help remembering the old medical inspections forced on women in your line of work. Cold hands, colder eyes, no consent. This talk of compassion feels like sunlight on an old scar. Afterward, you linger near the door. A woman you recognize from the bakery crowd approaches. "You thinking of joining the society?" she asks. "What society?" "Public Welfare Committee. We help distribute food, sometimes escort girls to shelters. You'd be good at it." You blink, surprised. "Me? Why not you?" That question follows you home like a shadow. The next week, you volunteer. Your first task is simple: carrying bread to a shelter in Lambeth. The air there is thick with soot. But the girls' laughter sounds familiar. Too familiar. Some of them are no older than you were when you started. They eye you with curiosity, half suspicion, half longing. One whispers, "You one of the rescuers then?" You hesitate. "Just someone bringing bread." She smirks. "Bread's better than sermons." You grin. "I've had both. Bread's definitely better." She laughs, and it breaks something open in you. You realize you've stepped across a line, not away from your past, but through it. Over the next months, you keep helping. You never preach. You just listen. Sometimes you read aloud, bits of Rossetti, or even the morning paper. The girls love the sound of stories that don't judge them. One afternoon, you visit the reform office to deliver a parcel. There on a cluttered desk, you see a ledger filled with neat handwriting. Next to former occupation, one entry reads domestic service. You smile quietly. The euphemism lives on. You add your own name to the volunteer list. For the first time, you write it in full. No alias, no initial. Just you. When you leave, the air outside feels crisp. The city loud but not hostile. You think about the debates swirling through Parliament, about speeches and pamphlets, about people arguing whether women like you deserve inclusion or invisibility. Historians might someday wonder if women in your position ever cared about politics. The truth is, yes, you cared deeply. You just didn't have time to say so while surviving. Now, with a little breath and bread to spare, you finally do. That night, you walk home through streets that glitter with rain. Passing a lamplit window, you see your reflection, a woman with steady eyes, a basket on her arm, and the faintest curve of a smile. You think about how many women you've been: the frightened girl at the brothel door, the wary apprentice, the half-educated reader, the baker's helper, and now this, someone who can give instead of being taken from. You whisper to your reflection, softly, like a prayer, not fallen, not saved, just standing. And somehow, that feels political enough. The air tonight smells of coal smoke and rain again. Same as always. You walk home through a narrow side street, boots scuffing over the cobbles, skirts brushing puddles that shimmer faintly under the gas lamps. The bakery's shutters are closed for the night, and the city hums its eternal lullaby. Wheels, hooves, voices fading into mist. You pause outside your building and tilt your head toward the sky. For the first time in years, you realize you don't flinch at the sound of footsteps behind you. London is still dangerous, yes, but you are no longer prey to it. You exist within it, part of its machinery, but also somehow above it, like smoke, drifting where it will. Inside, your small rented room smells faintly of flour and candle wax. You light the lamp, watching the glow spill across the table, where your few possessions sit: a folded letter from Annie, the little poetry book, and a chipped teacup with a crack that never quite leaked. You take off your shawl and sit by the window. Outside, fog swirls thick as cream. Somewhere a horse snorts. Somewhere else, a church bell calls the late hour. You sip lukewarm tea, breathe slowly, and feel the deep, tender weight of having survived. It's strange how much of your life has become quiet now. Steady work, familiar faces, the small kindness of a coin slipped to a hungry child, or a loaf given to a widow. You find comfort in it, the way some people find prayer. You think of Annie often. Her last letter said she'd found steadier work at the seaside laundry, where the sea sings louder than the preachers. You smile each time you reread it. She says the salt ruins her hands but clears her head. You imagine her there, hair loose in the wind, laughing with strangers, her voice blending with the gulls. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind in the late 19th century. Entire networks of working-class women began writing letters, forming unions, and quietly documenting their lives in diaries no one expected to read. Much of what historians now know about ordinary Victorian women came from those faded notebooks, scraps of honesty tucked into drawers. You wonder if someone might one day find yours, if you ever dared to write it. Sometimes, after a long shift, you do jot things down. Snippets of the day, overheard conversations, the scent of fresh bread. You never mention the brothel. Not out of shame, exactly, but because that chapter already feels like a story told by someone else. Still, the ink always smudges a little on those nights, as if memory insists on bleeding through. You've come to understand that life doesn't divide neatly between before and after. It's all continuous, a thread weaving through rooms, faces, and choices. Every version of you still exists somewhere in that tapestry. The girl behind the curtain, the woman on the street, the one reading poetry in bed. And you carry them all quietly, without apology. Sometimes the reformers still walk the streets, handing out pamphlets about purity and protection. You nod politely when they pass, and one even recognizes you once. "You've done well for yourself," she says. "You're proof that redemption works." You smile faintly, if you like. But what you don't tell her is this: you were never redeemed. You rebuilt yourself. Slowly, clumsily, stubbornly. Without sermons, without miracles. Historians still argue whether women like you were victims, rebels, or simply invisible. You could tell them the truth. It's never just one thing. It's every shade between dignity and survival, between laughter and exhaustion. But you suspect they wouldn't know what to do with that answer. One evening, you close the bakery early and walk to the river. The Thames glitters under a half-moon, the bridges arching like ribs over a sleeping body. You sit on a bench and let the city move around you. Boats drifting, lovers whispering, drunkards singing off key. And for the first time you feel, not joy exactly, but peace. That soft, hard-earned peace that feels like the absence of hunger, fear, or being watched. The peace of belonging to yourself. You whisper to the water. It's enough. A few drops of rain fall, quick and cold, like a benediction. You make your way home through the mist, lamp in hand. As you climb the stairs, you think about all the girls still out there under gaslight. Faces painted, laughter forced, hearts still learning how to beat their own rhythm. You wish them gentleness. You wish them time. Because that's what it takes. Time, not rescue. At your desk, you open Rossetti's poems again, tracing the lines that once made you weep. Tonight, they make you smile instead. You realize the poem never changed. You did. You close the book softly, blow out the lamp, and let the dark wrap around you like velvet. The 300-word wind, down, and now everything slows. The sound of the city fades, wheels, voices, wind, all softening into a hum at the edge of hearing. The air in your room feels warmer now, gentler. Your breath comes slower, deeper. Each inhale feels like pulling silk into your lungs. Each exhale a quiet release. You lean back, eyes half closed, letting the flicker of memory settle into calm. The brothel's laughter, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the ovens, all dissolve into distant echoes. You are no longer there. You are here, in this still moment, held safely between the past and the dark. Outside, rain begins again. Steady, rhythmic, forgiving. It taps against the window like an old friend, whispering that you've done enough. That rest is earned. You picture the street lamps glowing faintly through the fog, the city breathing in time with you. If anyone could see you now, they might think you're simply dozing at your desk. But inside, something vast and quiet unfolds. A field at dawn, a tide pulling out, the hush of forgiveness that asks for nothing in return, so you breathe once more, steady and sure. The night folds around you like soft linen. Sleep well, traveler. You've survived history,